Do you think that's something that's in the Irish people? That they say what you see.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Like Roy Walker on
Yes,
Catchphrase.
say what you see. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's always been it's the storytelling about the Irish thing. We do that. We tell it, and we don't, and we're and we're sort of being unabashed about it, not unvarnished. You might say unvarnished. And I just fear that so much of what we sing these days has become very, very varnished, both in sort of pop music culture, but also in the world of church music and Christian music. We're so busy varnishing things that it's not actually real, and it's not actually connecting with people anymore.
Tell me then, how would you construct a song or write a song? How does it happen for you as a songwriter?
It's usually an idea or a word or a phrase that jumps out at me. And well, I'll give you an example. One recently, the idea of, again, trying to bring a modern word to express something ancient and something eternal. The word renovation. I think we were sitting there talking to friends who were doing some renovating in their house, and it was an absolute nightmare. They were having to live in just 2 or 3 rooms of the house while this extension was being put on, and they were renovating the whole thing. And it just really brought home to me that renovation is not necessarily a pleasant process, but there's a really good outcome that's really worth it. And I guess the image there is talking about how, we believe, Christians believe that we are going to, even though we are in a tough place right now in terms of everything going on in the world, that actually the end of the story is a good ending. That where we get to, the new heavens and the new earth, where all of this stuff will be transformed and redeemed, and we believe reconciled to its creator, where stuff will be perfected. That's a really good end of the story. And so this, I ended up writing this song that talked about, this is a time of renovation. This is the future information, that even these small encouraging bits of positivity that we see that demonstrate that perfect future, encouraging people to latch onto those and grab onto them. One of the phrases like, this is the workshop of your kingdom. These are the tools that fashion freedom. So again, but it all started from that first word, renovation, of thinking, right, the general metaphor here is building and pulling things together. So
you get a tune with that?
I'll sit down with a guitar, I'll start just mumbling.
I know the feeling. I've done it plenty times.
random vowel sounds,
Yes. You mentioned earlier that when you were singing your song to some people in Newcastle West, you said it was fantastic. Okay. You've done a couple of albums, of course. One of them, Drowning in the Shallow, which was acclaimed as near perfect. How do you feel now when other people sing your songs? How do you feel?
It's an incredible feeling. It's one of the most precious feelings, George. It's amazing. It's really special. It feels really humbling, and it feels like, well, I guess what I've always tried to do is in my songs is to try and, what people have often reported to me is that, like, oh, what you said really expressed really deeply how I felt about that, but I didn't really know it yet. But I hadn't found words for it. And it feels like that happened when we wrote a song just after the Queen had died. So many people got back to me and said, like, that really expressed what I was feeling, but I hadn't been able to find the words. And I guess that's a really special feeling for a songwriter, that people are saying, right, okay, you've helped me articulate something, even though it was kind of buried deep down here, but it was in there, but you've helped me get that out. That goes to a whole other level then when it's a song that when they actually start singing that song, and you realize that people are able to use that to connect with one another and with God. That feels like a real privilege. That's an amazing thing.
Have you got a new album on the back burner at the minute then?
Yeah, very much so. So, well, there's two main projects. There's my own album coming out with sort of like hands in the air, feet in the dirt. That's what it's going to be called.
Okay.
Probably later on this year. But the project I'm talking about that we're working on with the London Institute of Contemporary Christianity and Integrity Music is called Boundless. And that's getting some of the top songwriters in the UK together to write some of these songs that are really, really attentive to the words and using modern day phraseology and metaphor, and songs that we really believe that people will relate to in their 9 to 5, not just songs that will work not just on a Sunday, but from Monday through to
Yeah,
Saturday as well.
gotcha.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, mentioned there working with other songwriters. Did you ever get to work with Robin Mark? I mean, he's one of my favorites, I would say. Robin.
Yeah, Robin's a wonderful fella. I've done some things with him over the years. I've sadly never written a song with him. That would be a wonderful thing to do. But yeah, Robin's a leading light in this world,
Yeah.
and perfect example of what we were talking about earlier. I'll never forget. I'll never forget getting a letter from somebody who had been leading worship with an American worship leader who shall remain nameless, who had been fairly pernickety, saying he was in the band working with this American worship leader. And he was saying, "Oh no, you're singing the alto line. Can you sing the tenor line, please? No, don't play it. No, play it like it is on the album. You know, like really, really."
Oh yeah.
And they said, and then in week 2, Robin Mark turned up, and they said Robin's attitude to worship leading can be best described as play what you want and mine's a Guinness.
So basically, on the fly, basically, he played whatever the Lord led him to do at the time.
Wonderful man, and you know those songs speak for themselves. You know, they've been sung all over the world by so many people. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos of, whole bunches of army, bunches of military folks around the world singing his songs. It's a sight to see.
Now, of course, music is not your only project. You went from music, dare I say it, to politics.
Yeah.
How did that come about? How did people get into politics?
It was the music that led me into the political realm because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the songs that I was writing were complaining or trying to educate people about the state of the world economic system, and whether it was sweatshops in Bangladesh, whether it was orphanages in Uganda, whether it was people being persecuted for their faith in Egypt. I was increasingly being taken away on trips by agencies like Christian Aid, Oxfam, Clear Fund, Oasis, Open Doors, these sort of folks to see situations and then come back and sing songs about them. And I was doing things for another organization called Speak that was trying to, I think a lot of those organizations in the late 90s, early noughties, people would have known them as sort of fundraising organizations. You know, give us your money to send off to famine in Africa. And as we all went through a process of learning in those days, that actually it was not enough to just send money off randomly, that actually that fell down a pit unless we actually did something about the trade rules, unless we did something about debt, and unless we did and allowed them to trade their way out of their own problems rather than just, giving handouts that actually wouldn't be ultimately effective. And so those agencies were increasingly lobbying and campaigning for some of those world trade rules to change and some of those systems to change to governments around the world. And so increasingly I was being asked to sing to or speak to politicians and folks in Parliament. And when I was there, what became patently clear to me was that there was no magic dust in Parliament. There was nobody operating on a higher moral, spiritual, or intellectual plane than a lot of the people I've been working with in the world of NGOs and the church that actually realized these are, folks doing a really tough job, doing their best in a tough job, but, nothing special going on here. Realizing actually, I think we need to create a bridge so that people with real strategic insight, wisdom, and energy from civic society, from outside the traditional worlds of politics, of people who got into politics, need to get involved in politics. That actually politics would be a better thing with normal people getting involved in it, especially people who are believers getting involved in it, can only be the better for the antiseptic effect of it. And so, doors opened that I was able to get involved, and and the rest is history. I won't bore you with the long story, but I ended up getting very involved in Parliament and a lot of the stuff going on there, and I've been involved ever since, really.
I mean, let's face it, politicians don't have a good name in any sense of the word, but do you think Christians should get involved in politics and really try and make a change in the world?
Absolutely. I often, if somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, Andy, I don't really get into politics." I don't really care about politics. And I'll ask them, well, but do you care about people? You know, I give the example of our neighbour Frank in our estate, who lived beside us in London. You know, Jesus said, "Love your neighbour as yourself." You know,
Yep.
and it's a profound statement that we don't often really think about very much. You know, I often
Correct.
ask people at meetings, well, what does it mean to love yourself? How do you love yourself? And the truth is, we love ourselves by a whole range of day-to-day life strategies that keep the show of life on the road. You know, we clean our teeth.
Yep.
we make sure we've got a national insurance number. We try to get a roof over our heads. We try to get a job. We try to form into communities so that we're not lonely. You know, we actually try to look after our health. There's a whole set of practical things that we do to love ourselves, to look after ourselves. And Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself." And so we have to care about all those practical things for our neighbors as well, if we're meant to love them in the way that we love ourselves. Otherwise, that statement just doesn't make any sense. And it also makes sense because there's no point in me loving my neighbor Frank. You know, it's all very well for me to say, "Oh, Frank, I love you," but Frank's really struggling to get down the stairs in our block of flats because the lift's broken. So to love Frank, I have to worry about getting that lift fixed. You know, to love Frank, I have to care about the fact that there's no bus to get him to the GP. I have to care about the fact that there's no appointments at the GP surgery so that he can get his knee seen to. I need to care about the fact that there's a waiting list for him to get his knee surgery at the local hospital. You know, for me to just care about him in a vacuum and just love him in a vacuum doesn't make any sense whatsoever. To me to actually love him means I need to care about all those things. So I quite often say to people, look, if you care about people, you've got to care about politics.
Yeah.
None of us love people in a vacuum. It's a nonsense to think that we do. And, you know, and yes, there's plenty to scrutinize and criticize about politics, but my bath has never got cleaner by me standing outside it saying, "Be clean." Be clean. My bath has only ever got cleaner by me getting on the inside of it and scrubbing it. And I think sometimes we just create these little ivory towers for ourselves, you know. People will often say to me, "Oh, Andy, bless you for what you're doing in politics, bless you for what you're doing. I couldn't do it. I know if I did it, I fear I would be polluted. I fear I would be corrupted, you know." And at that point, I'll usually say, "Look, can I let you in on a secret? You already are polluted. You already are corrupted. You know, I could talk about the crystal in your mobile phones that have been you know, harvested from slave labor in sub-Saharan Africa. I could talk about the petrol you put in your car that's like from Middle Eastern states that are actively oppressing Christians and oppressing women. I could talk about where your pensions landed and all the investments that are actually supporting the arms trade to some shocking regimes around the country. We could talk about your mortgage. We could talk about your broadband. We could, you know, the bottom line is that we are involved in a fallen world. We are involved in a messed up system in ways that are probably more profound with our wallet, in ways that are probably more profound than just where we put an X on a voting card.
Yeah.
And so to say that, oh, you know, I couldn't be involved in that, the question is not should we be involved. We are involved.
Yeah.
We are actively involved every day, and we are guilty. We are involved. So the question is like, shall we get involved to see this thing improved? And that's what we're calling people to with Christians in politics. And it's wonderful to see people having an impact and shining. Yeah. And because what we forget often, if you're the sort of person who's grown up in a church, you forget that the church is one of the few places in the UK. The church and Weight Watchers are the only places that are still growing in the UK in terms of weekly groupings. People aren't getting together in large numbers anymore. You know, no. It's the church and Weight Watchers, and you learn things from being part of a group of people. You learn public speaking skills, you learn communication skills, you learn conflict resolution skills, you learn how to organize a rota. You know, and we forget there's a real head start. If you've been involved in something like the church, you are really well placed to serve in the realm of politics. And often the church is so involved in communities, reaching out to the most needy and the marginalized, and involved in so many amazing programs, projects, food banks, debt advice centers, working with young people, working with parents and toddlers. Folks, the church is so well interfaced with so many of the challenges in any given community. Often members of the church are best placed to represent those communities because they know best what's going on in them.
Amen.
And so actually, there's a head start for Christians to be serving in the realm of politics in that public way.
You mentioned there, like, about making an impact. You've already made an impact, of course, with the National Prayer. Because tell us what the impact was with that. Was it in 2022?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that it does have an impact every year that we do it, but yes, there was a particularly wild thing happened in 2022 that you may have heard about, and that how best to put it. There was an amazing moment. Les Isaac, the wonderful preacher, actually stopped 4 minutes early, and I thought, gosh, here's an opportunity. We've got a bit of space. And it's pretty intimidating to do music. You've got Keir Starmer sitting there, Boris Johnson sitting there, Justin Welby sitting there. It's a little bit intimidating. But I really felt like we could leave some space. These people we've been picking up from, there's like 700 people in the room, and you're realizing how tired and how post-COVID, how struggling a lot of these people are, and just felt a lot of the pain in the room.